The desert sun hung low in the western sky, painting Salvation Creek in shades of copper and blood. Jake Morrison rode into town on a dust-covered mare, his hat pulled low against the dying light. 3 days of hard riding had brought him here from the Colorado Territory, chasing rumors of work at the silver mines. What he found instead was a town that seemed to breathe with secrets. Main Street stretched before him like a dusty scar, lined with false-fronted buildings that leaned against each other like drunken companions. The Silver Dollar Saloon stood at the heart of it all, its bat-wing doors swinging with the promise of whiskey and forgetting. Jake tied his mare to the hitching post, brushing trail dust from his coat. He'd seen 100 towns like this, but something about Salvation Creek felt different, heavier, like the air before a storm. Inside the Silver Dollar, smoke hung thick as morning fog. The piano in the corner wheezed out a tune that might have been cheerful in better hands. Men crowded around poker tables, their faces hard as the cards they held. Jake made his way to the bar, spurs ringing against the wooden floor. That's when he saw her. She moved between the tables like water through rocks, graceful despite the grabbing hands and crude comments. Her dress was blue as a mountain lake, modest compared to the other girls who worked the room. But it was her face that stopped Jake cold beautiful in a way that seemed out of place in this rough establishment, with eyes that held depths he couldn't fathom. When she smiled at the patrons, it never quite reached those eyes. "Whiskey," Jake told the barkeep, but his gaze followed the girl in blue. "That's Lily," the barkeep said, following Jake's stare. "Tom Brennan's daughter. Pretty thing, ain't she? But I'd keep my distance if I were you. Stranger. Her daddy don't take kindly to drifter sniffing around." Jake watched as a cowhand grabbed Lily's wrist, pulling her toward his lap. She twisted away with practiced ease, her smile never faltering. But Jake caught the flash of something fear-anger in her eyes before she moved on to the next table. When she approached the bar for a tray of drinks, Jake found himself straightening. Up close, she was even more striking. Her hair was the color of autumn wheat, pinned up to reveal a slender neck. A small scar marked her left temple, barely visible unless you were looking. "Evening, miss," Jake said, tipping his hat. She glanced at him, and for a moment, her practiced smile slipped. "You're new," she said. It wasn't a question. "Jake Morrison, just rode in." "Well, Mr. Morrison, welcome to Salvation Creek." She began loading glasses onto her tray. "Though if you're smart, you won't be staying long." That a warning. This time when she smiled, it held genuine amusement. "Consider it friendly advice. This town has a way of getting its hooks into people." "Maybe I like hooks," Jake said, surprising himself with the boldness. Lily paused, really looking at him now. He wasn't handsome in the classical sense. His face bore the weathering of too many years under the desert sun, and a scar ran through his left eyebrow. But his eyes were kind, something she rarely saw in the Silver Dollar. "Then you're either very brave or very foolish, Mr. Morrison." She lifted the loaded tray. "Either way, enjoy your whiskey." As she turned to go, their fingers brushed when he steadied a tilting glass on her tray. The touch lasted only a heartbeat, but Jake felt it like lightning through his bones. Lily's eyes widened slightly, and he knew she'd felt it too. From across the room, 2 sets of eyes watched this exchange with interest. Tom Brennan, a heavy-set man with graying whiskers and the calculating gaze of a man who'd weighed the worth of everything and everyone, sat at his usual table near the back stairs. Beside him lounged Rico Valdez, whose scarred face told the story of a dozen knife fights. Valdez's hand rested casually on the pistol at his hip. "New blood," Valdez muttered in Spanish-accented English. "So I see," Brennan replied, his eyes never leaving Jake. "Find out who he is, where he's from, what he wants." Jake felt their stares, but kept his attention on his whiskey. In the mirror behind the bar, He watched Lily work the room. She moved with efficiency, always staying just out of reach, deflecting advances with a laugh or a clever word. But he noticed how she kept glancing toward her father's table, how her shoulders tensed whenever Valdez shifted in his chair. The evening wore on. Jake nursed his whiskey and listened to the talk around him. He learned that the silver mines were playing out, that tensions with the Apache were running high, that Tom Brennan owned not just the silver dollar but half the businesses in town. He learned that Brennan's daughter was considered the jewel of Salvation Creek, though no man had successfully courted her. Her daddy's saving her for someone special. One drunk confided, someone with deep pockets and political connections. She's his ticket to respectability, or so he figures. Jake's jaw tightened. He'd seen it before, women treated like property, bargained away for profit or position. The thought of it happening to that girl with the sad smile and quick wit made something dark stir in his chest. Near midnight, the crowd began to thin. Jake had moved to a corner table, ostensibly playing solitaire but really watching the room. Lily passed by with an armload of empty bottles. "Still here, Mr. Morrison?" she asked softly. "Seems I've developed a taste for your local whiskey." "Is that all?" The question slipped out before she could stop it, and color rose in her cheeks. Jake looked up at her, his expression serious. "No, miss, that's not all." She should have walked away, should have laughed it off or made some cutting remark to put him in his place. Instead, she found herself lingering, caught by something in his eyes, a promise, maybe, or a challenge. "Lily," Brennan's voice cracked like a whip across the room. "Those bottles won't move themselves." "Coming, Papa." But before she left, she leaned slightly closer to Jake. The old stable behind Morrison's feed store, 1 hour after closing. If you're interested in more than whiskey. Then she was gone, leaving Jake with a racing heart and the faint scent of lavender in her wake. The next hour crawled by. Jake watched Brennan and Valdez closely, noting their habits, their tells. Brennan was a man used to control, his movements economical, his voice carrying the authority of someone rarely challenged. Valdez was pure predator, coiled and ready, his scarred face a map of violence. Finally, the silver dollar began to empty. Jake left with a group of cowboys, making a show of heading toward the hotel. But once in the shadows, he doubled back, keeping to the alleys. The moon was new, offering little light, which suited him fine. He found the old stable without difficulty. It stood abandoned, its doors hanging askew. Inside, darkness pooled thick as oil. Jake's hand moved instinctively to his Colt .45. "It's me," came Lily's voice from the shadows. She stepped into a shaft of starlight from a hole in the roof, still wearing the blue dress but with a shawl wrapped tight around her shoulders. "Dangerous for you to be out here," Jake said. "Everything about my life is dangerous, Mr. Morrison." She moved closer, and he could see the strain around her eyes, the weariness that had nothing to do with the late hour. "I don't know why I asked you to come. Maybe because you looked at me like I was a person instead of merchandise. Is that what you are to him, to your father?" Her laugh was bitter. "I'm his investment, his pathway to a better life. He's already got buyers lined up, Big Pete Garrison chief among them." Jake had heard of Garrison, owned the largest ranch in 3 counties, had a reputation for cruelty and a taste for young women. "You could leave," Jake said. "Tonight, I'd take you anywhere you wanted to go." "And then what, he'd hunt us down? You don't know my father, Mr. Morrison. You don't know what he's capable of." She wrapped her arms around herself. "Besides, why would you risk that for a woman you just met?" Jake stepped closer, close enough to see the tears she was fighting. "Because sometimes a man knows. Sometimes he looks at a woman and sees his whole future in her eyes. Sounds foolish, I know." "Yes," she whispered. "It does." But she didn't step away when he reached out to touch her face. What's your dream, Lily, if you could go anywhere, be anyone? I used to dream about California, about a little house with a garden, where I could grow things instead of serving drinks to men who see me as meat, where I could read books in the evening and no one would tell me I was getting above myself. Her voice broke slightly. Foolish dreams for a saloon keeper's daughter. Not foolish, Jake said firmly. Human. She looked up at him then, really looked, and what she saw made her breath catch. Here was a man who might actually mean what he said, who might actually see her as more than Tom Brennan's beautiful daughter, more than a prize to be won or bought. You should leave town tomorrow, she said, before my father decides you're a threat, before... I'm not going anywhere, Jake interrupted. Not without you. Then you're a fool. Maybe, but I'm a fool who's going to be at the Silver Dollar again tomorrow night, and the night after, and every night until you realize you deserve better than being auctioned off to the highest bidder. Lily stared at him, this strange, stubborn man who'd ridden into her life like something out of the dime novels she read in secret. Then, impulsively, she rose on her toes and kissed him quick, fierce, tasting of desperation and hope. Now I've given you a reason to stay, she said, stepping back. God help us both. She slipped away into the darkness before Jake could respond, leaving him standing in the ruined stable with the taste of her on his lips and the certainty that his life had just taken a turn from which there was no going back. As he made his way back to the hotel, Jake didn't see Rico Valdez watching from the shadows, didn't see the calculating smile that crossed the scarred man's face. But even if he had, it wouldn't have changed his mind. He'd found something in Salvation Creek worth fighting for, and Jake Morrison had never backed down from a fight in his life. The desert wind picked up, rattling windows and sending tumbleweeds dancing down Main Street like ghosts. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, and in her small room above the Silver Dollar, Lily Brennan pressed her fingers to her lips and wondered if she'd just signed both their death warrants or finally found her salvation. The morning sun found Jake at the town's general store, gathering information under the guise of buying supplies. Sam Henderson, the shopkeeper, proved talkative once Jake mentioned he might be staying in town a while. Tom Brennan. Henderson's voice dropped as he measured out coffee beans. Been here since '74. Came from back east with his wife and little Lily. The missus died of fever that first winter. Changed him. Folks say, got hard, got ambitious. And the daughter? Henderson glanced around nervously. Sweet girl, takes after her mother. But Brennan guards her like she's made of gold. Word is he's been in talks with Big Pete Garrison. You know Garrison. Jake nodded. He'd heard plenty about the rancher on his ride into town. Garrison's been sniffing around for a young wife. His last one. Well, she died under mysterious circumstances. But he's got money and influence, and that's what Brennan wants. Jake paid for his supplies, his mind turning over this information. He spent the rest of the day exploring Salvation Creek, mapping its alleys and escape routes habits from his years of drifting that had kept him alive more than once. The town was larger than it first appeared, with a mix of legitimate businesses and establishments that operated in the shadows. Everything seemed to flow back to Tom Brennan in one way or another. That evening, Jake returned to the Silver Dollar. The saloon was busier than the previous night, filled with cowboys fresh from a cattle drive. He took a table where he could watch both the door and Brennan's usual spot. Lily appeared in a green dress tonight, her hair pinned up with small silver combs. When she saw Jake, something flickered in her eyes, relief warning before her professional mask slipped back into place. Evening, Mr. Morrison, she said, bringing him whiskey without being asked. I see you decided to stay. Told you I would. She leaned slightly closer under the pretense of wiping the table. You shouldn't have come back. Rico's been asking about you. Let him ask. Before she could respond, the saloon doors burst open. Big Pete Garrison strode in like he owned the place, which, Jake reflected, he might as well have. Garrison was a mountain of a man, broad-shouldered and thick-necked, with small, mean eyes set in a face marked by indulgence and cruelty. "Brennan," Garrison's voice boomed across the room. "Where's that pretty daughter of yours?" Tom Brennan rose from his table, all smiles and deference. "Pete, good to see you. Lily, come greet Mr. Garrison properly." Jake watched Lily's face go pale. She set down her tray and walked toward Garrison with the measured steps of someone approaching a gallows. "There's my beauty," Garrison said, catching her arm and pulling her close. His hand slid to her waist in a way that made Jake's blood burn. "Getting prettier every day. Soon you'll be making my ranch house a proper home, won't you?" "Mr. Garrison," Lily said carefully, trying to maintain distance without seeming to reject him. "You're too kind." "Kind nothing. I know quality when I see it." His grip tightened, and Jake saw Lily wince. "Your daddy and I have been talking terms. Won't be long now before—" "The lady seems uncomfortable." Jake hadn't meant to stand, hadn't meant to speak, but there he was, on his feet with every eye in the saloon turning toward him. Garrison's piggy eyes narrowed. "And who might you be?" "Someone who thinks a man should keep his hands to himself unless invited." The saloon went dead quiet. Even the piano player stopped mid-note. Rico Valdez's hand drifted toward his gun. "Jake Morrison," Brennan said, his voice dangerously soft. "Mr. Morrison is new to town. Pete doesn't understand how things work here yet." "Then maybe someone should teach him," Garrison said, releasing Lily with a shove that sent her stumbling. "You questioning how I treat my property, boy?" "She's not property," Jake said evenly. "She's a woman, and where I come from, we treat women with respect." Garrison laughed, an ugly sound. "Where you come from and where's that exactly? Some high-minded eastern city, or maybe you're one of those reformed gunfighters who found religion." He stepped closer, using his size to intimidate. "Listen good. Saddle Tramp, that girl's been bought and paid for. Maybe not in cash yet, but in promises and understandings. Tom Brennan owes me, and she's how he's going to settle up." "Pete," Brennan interjected. "Let's not—" "Shut up, Tom." Garrison never took his eyes off Jake. "This boy needs educating. See, Mr. Morrison, in Salvation Creek. I get what I want. Always have. Always will. And right now, I want that pretty little filly. She'll look real good on my arm at the governor's ball next month. After that," his smile was vile, "well, a man has needs, and she'll learn to meet them, one way or another." Jake's fist connected with Garrison's jaw before anyone saw it coming. The big man staggered back, blood spurting from his lips. The saloon erupted. Valdez went for his gun, but Jake had already drawn, his Colt appearing in his hand like magic. "Don't!" Jake warned, his gun trained on Valdez while keeping Garrison in sight. "This is between him and me." Garrison wiped blood from his mouth, his face purple with rage. "You just signed your death warrant, boy. Nobody lays hands on Big Pete Garrison and lives to brag about it." "I'm not bragging," Jake said calmly. "Just stating facts. You touch that woman again without her permission, and I'll do more than bloody your lip." "You threatening me?" Garrison's hand moved toward his own gun. "No threat, a promise." For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Brennan stepped forward, hands raised placatingly. "Gentlemen, please, we're all civilized men here. Pete, Mr. Morrison is obviously new and doesn't understand our arrangements. Morrison, you've made your point. Why don't you take your drink and go?" "I'll go when I'm ready," Jake said, not lowering his gun. Lily suddenly moved, placing herself between Jake and the others. "Please," she said, looking directly at Jake. "Not here, not like this." Something in her eyes made Jake slowly holster his weapon. Garrison straightened his coat, his piggy eyes promising retribution. "This isn't over," he snarled. "Brennan, you get your house in order, or I will, and you." He pointed at Jake. Better start sleeping with both eyes open." He stormed out, taking several of his men with him. The saloon slowly returned to normal, though the tension remained thick as smoke. "You fool," Brennan hissed at Jake. "You have no idea what you've done. Rico, make sure our friend finds his way out, permanently if necessary." But Lily stepped forward again.
"No, Papa, please, he didn't know."
"Didn't know?" Brennan's face flushed. "He just alienated the most powerful man in 3 counties. Do you realize what Garrison could do to us, to our business?" "Our business?" Lily's voice rose slightly. "You mean selling your daughter like cattle?" The slap echoed through the saloon. Lily's hand flew to her cheek, tears starting in her eyes. Jake moved instinctively, but found Valdez's gun pressed against his ribs. "I think you should leave now, Senor," Valdez said softly. "While you still can walk." Jake looked at Lily, who gave an almost imperceptible shake of her head. Reluctantly, he backed toward the door, Valdez's gun following him every step. Outside, the night air felt cool against his heated face. He'd made things worse, he knew, but the thought of that animal Garrison putting his hands on Lily... Psst! Jake spun toward the alley beside the saloon. A small figure emerged Charlie, the stable boy who minded the horses. "Miss Lily says to meet her at the old mine shaft. Midnight. Says it's urgent." The boy disappeared before Jake could respond. The next 3 hours crawled by. Jake checked his weapons, packed his saddlebags, prepared for whatever might come. The old mine shaft stood at the edge of town, abandoned when the silver played out. Not the safest meeting place, but private. Lily arrived wrapped in a dark cloak, moving like a ghost through the shadows. Even in the moonlight, Jake could see the mark on her cheek where Brennan had struck her. "Let me see," he said gently, reaching for her face. She pulled back. "It's nothing. I've had worse." Then, seeing his expression, she sighed. "You can't save me. Jake, nobody can. My father owes Garrison more than just money. There are documents, proof of things my father did to gain control of this town. Garrison keeps them as insurance. If I don't marry him, there's always another way." "Is there?" She laughed bitterly. "Where would we go? How would we live? You think my father would just let us ride away? He'd send Rico, or hire someone worse. We'd be looking over our shoulders forever." Jake pulled her close, feeling her tremble against him. "Then we face it together. Tonight, we take what we can and ride hard for the border. I know places where even your father wouldn't find us." For a moment, she melted against him. Then she pulled back, reaching into her cloak. "Take this." She pressed something into his hand, a silver locket on a chain. It was my mother's, the only thing of hers father let me keep. "Lily, if something happens to me, I want someone to remember that I was more than Tom Brennan's daughter, more than what this town made me. Nothing's going to happen to you." She kissed him then, fierce and desperate, tasting of tears and whiskey and lost dreams. When she pulled away, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Garrison's bringing in a gunfighter, Cole Mackenzie. He'll be here tomorrow. Rico told me. Mackenzie doesn't miss, they say. He's killed 17 men in fair fights. I have faced men like him before." "Not for me. You haven't." She touched his face gently. "That changes things. Makes a man vulnerable. Makes him slow. Or makes him faster. Gives him something worth fighting for." She studied his face in the moonlight. This strange, stubborn man who'd walked into her cage and made her believe in keys. "Meet me tomorrow night. The storage room behind the bar. I'll have money, supplies. We'll leave while the saloon's busy. And if they try to stop us..." Her hand moved to her bodice, revealing the handle of a small derringer. "Then we'll stop them first. I'm not going to Garrison's ranch. Jake, not alive. It won't come to that." "Promise me," she said urgently. "Promise if it comes to it. You won't let them take me." A bullet's cleaner than what Garrison has planned. Lily? Promise me. Jake pulled her close again, feeling the weight of her words. I promise, but I also promise it won't come to that. We're getting out of here. You and me. We're going to find that house in California. You're going to have that garden. She clung to him for a long moment, then pulled away. I have to go. Father will check my room soon. He's taken to locking me in at night since Garrison started coming around. How did you... Window. There's a oak tree close enough to climb. I've been practicing. A ghost of her old smile flickered across her face. Turns out saloon girls can have hidden talents. She slipped away into the darkness, leaving Jake alone with the weight of promises and the certainty that tomorrow would bring blood. In the distance, a train whistle wailed like a lost soul. Jake fingered the locket in his hand, then tucked it safe inside his shirt, close to his heart. Tomorrow, Cole Mackenzie would come. Tomorrow, the dance would turn deadly. But tonight, Jake Morrison had found something worth dying for, and more importantly, something worth living for. He just had to keep them both alive long enough to see that California garden. The next evening arrived with an oppressive heat that seemed to press down on Salvation Creek like a flat iron. Jake positioned himself at the Silver Dollar early, choosing a corner table that gave him clear sight lines to both entrances. His Colt sat loose in its holster, and he'd added a second gun tucked into his boot lessons learned from years of surviving in towns where death came calling without invitation. The saloon filled slowly, the usual crowd seeming subdued, expectant. Word traveled fast in a town this size. Everyone knew Cole Mackenzie was coming. Everyone knew blood would spill before the night was through. Lily moved through the room like a spirit, her face carefully blank. She wore a red dress tonight, Brennan's choice. Jake guessed. Something to catch Garrison's eye. When she passed Jake's table, she didn't acknowledge him, but her fingers briefly touched the back of his chair. The signal. Everything was ready for their escape. At 8 o'clock sharp, the Batwing door swung open. Cole Mackenzie entered like death itself, tall, lean, dressed all in black save for the silver conchos on his gun belt. His face was angular, almost gaunt, with pale eyes that seemed to look through people rather than at them. He moved with the economy of a man who never wasted motion, never made an unnecessary gesture. Mr. Mackenzie. Tom Brennan rose from his table, voice booming with false cheer. Welcome to the Silver Dollar. Your reputation precedes you. Mackenzie's eyes swept the room once, paused on Jake for a heartbeat, then dismissed him. Where's Garrison? On his way. Can I offer you a drink while... Whiskey. The good stuff. Mackenzie took a seat where he could watch the entire room. And send the girl over, the pretty one in red. Jake's hand tightened on his glass, but he forced himself to remain still. Lily approached Mackenzie's table with measured steps. Mr. Mackenzie, she said quietly, what can I bring you? His pale eyes studied her with the same detachment he might show examining a horse. So, you're what all the fuss is about. Garrison's got expensive taste. He gestured to the chair beside him. Sit. I have other customers. Sit! The word cracked like a whip. Lily sank into the chair, her back rigid. The doors burst open again. Big Pete Garrison entered with 4 of his ranch hands, his face still showing bruises from Jake's fist. His piggy eyes found Jake immediately, and his smile was ugly with anticipation. There's the dead man, Garrison announced loudly. Still breathing? I see. Well, we'll fix that soon enough. He crossed to Mackenzie's table, completely ignoring Lily. Cole, glad you could make it. I trust Brennan's been hospitable. Hospitable enough? Mackenzie's gaze never left Jake. That him? That's him, Jake Morrison. Thinks he's some kind of knight in shining armor. Garrison laughed. Show him what happens to knights in Salvation Creek. Cole. Mackenzie stood slowly, his movement liquid. Jake Morrison, you've caused Mr. Garrison considerable inconvenience. Jake pushed back from his table, standing to face the gunfighter. Garrison caused his own inconvenience. I just pointed it out. Nevertheless, you struck him. That requires satisfaction. Mackenzie stepped into the open space between tables. I'll make it clean. You have my word on that. No. Lily jumped to her feet, but Garrison caught her arm, yanking her against him. Now, sweetheart, Garrison said, his breath hot against her ear. Let the men sort this out, then you and I can discuss your future properly. Jake saw Lily's hand move toward the hidden derringer, saw the desperation in her eyes. If she drew on Garrison here, surrounded by his men, she'd die before the gun cleared her bodice. Let her go, Garrison, Jake said calmly. Your quarrel's with me. My quarrel, boy. I don't quarrel. I take what I want. And after Cole here puts you in the ground, I'm taking little Lily home, going to teach her some manners, going to... Mr. Garrison. Mackenzie's voice cut through Garrison's crude promises. Perhaps the lady should be removed from the line of fire. Wouldn't want that pretty dress spoiled. It was then that Jake realized something. Mackenzie's pale eyes held no pleasure in this moment, no anticipation. He was a professional, nothing more. A man doing a job he'd done 17 times before. Lily. Brennan called out, "Come here, daughter." Garrison released her with obvious reluctance. Lily moved toward her father, but as she passed Jake's table, she stumbled. Jake caught her arm to steady her, and felt her press something into his palm, a brass key. "The door behind the bar," she whispered, so low only he could hear. "When it starts." Then she was at her father's side, Brennan's hand tight on her shoulder. "Gentlemen," Mackenzie said, removing his black coat with precise movements. "Shall we proceed, Mr. Morrison? I assume you're armed." "I am." "Then face me. On the count of 3, we draw. Clean and simple." Mackenzie took his position. "Unless you'd prefer to apologize to Mr. Garrison and leave town immediately." Jake almost smiled. "Can't do that." "Pity, you seem like a decent sort." Mackenzie's hand hovered near his gun. "Ready yourself." The saloon held its breath. Jake could hear his own heartbeat, loud as thunder. He thought of Lily, of California gardens, of promises made in moonlight. "1," someone called out. Jake's world narrowed to Mackenzie's hand, watching for the telltale twitch that preceded the draw. 2. Suddenly, all hell broke loose. The front doors exploded inward, and Rico Valdez stumbled through, his shirt dark with blood. "Apache," he gasped. "They're coming, the whole band, riding hard." The saloon erupted in chaos. Men scrambled for weapons, overturning tables in their haste. Garrison's men rushed toward the doors. In the confusion, Jake saw his chance. "Lily!" He lunged toward her, but Brennan shoved her behind him, drawing his own gun. "You're not taking her," Brennan snarled. Mackenzie, the consummate professional, kept his gun trained on Jake despite the chaos. "Apache or not, I have a job to finish." "Your job's done." Jake said, "Garrison's about to have bigger problems than me." Outside, war cries split the air. Gunfire erupted. A window shattered, and a flaming arrow embedded itself in the wooden floor. The storage room. Lily broke free from her father, running toward the bar. Jake followed, dodging between panicked patrons. Brennan's shot splintered the wood beside Jake's head. "Stop them," Garrison bellowed, but his men were already engaged with the Apache attack outside. Jake reached the door behind the bar. Jamming the key into the lock, it turned, and he pushed Lily through, following close behind. The storage room was cramped, lined with whiskey barrels and crates, but there in the back corner, another door. "My mother's room," Lily gasped, pulling Jake toward it. "Father sealed it after she died, But I broke through last week. It leads to the alley. They burst through into a small, dust-covered chamber. Women's clothes still hung in the wardrobe, preserved like a shrine. Lily grabbed a leather satchel from beneath the bed supplies she'd hidden. "The money?" Jake asked. She patted her bodice. "Safe. Mother taught me well. Always keep your escape fund close to your heart." Another window shattered somewhere in the saloon. The Apache attack was intensifying. Jake could hear Garrison screaming orders, Mackenzie's gun barking steadily. "The horses." "Already waiting," Lily said. "Charlie's holding them at the old well. I promised him $10. Jake stared at her with new admiration. "You planned all this?" "I've been planning to escape for 2 years. I just needed someone worth escaping with." She pulled something from the floorboards, a Colt .45, well-maintained, despite its age. Mother's gun? She was quite the shot, before Father broke her spirit. They slipped out the concealed exit into the alley. The town was in chaos, Apache raiders striking at multiple points, buildings beginning to burn. It was a raid, not a full attack, but more than enough to cover their escape. As they ran through the shadows, Jake glimpsed Two Hawks leading a group of warriors. The Apache war chief saw him too, and for a moment their eyes met. Two Hawks raised his rifle in what might have been a salute, then wheeled his horse away. Jake suddenly understood this wasn't a coincidence. Someone had told the Apache that tonight would be a good night to raid Salvation Creek. They found Charlie at the well, holding Jake's mare and a sturdy paint horse. The boy's eyes were wide with fear and excitement. $10, like you promised, he said to Lily. She gave him 20. "For your silence, Charlie. You never saw us." "Saw who, miss?" The boy grinned and disappeared into the smoke. As they mounted, a figure emerged from the shadows. Cole Mackenzie, his black clothes torn, a graze bleeding on his cheek. Jake went for his gun, but Mackenzie held up empty hands. "Easy, Morrison. I'm not here for you." "Then why?" "Professional courtesy. Garrison's dead. Apache arrow took him in the throat while he was screaming about catching you two. Ugly way to go." Mackenzie's pale eyes moved to Lily. "Ma'am, your father's looking for you." "Let him look," Lily said coldly. Mackenzie nodded slowly. "Figured you'd say that." He stepped aside, clearing their path. "California's nice this time of year, I hear. A lot of opportunities for folks wanting to start fresh." Jake studied the gunfighter. "Why?" "Because I've put 17 men in the ground for pay. Morrison. But I never killed for sport. And I never helped cage a woman." He touched his hat brim. "Besides, my employer's dead. Contract's void. You folks best ride now, while the Apache are keeping everyone busy." They didn't need to be told twice. Jake spurred his horse, Lily beside him, riding hard into the desert night. Behind them, Salvation Creek burned, the flames painting the sky crimson. As they crested the first rise, Lily reined in briefly, looking back. "Any regrets?" Jake asked. She reached over, taking his hand. "Just one. I should have shot him myself." "Your father?" "Garrison." Her smile was fierce. "But the Apache saved me the trouble. Come on, California's waiting." They rode on, two shadows against the star-filled sky, in her saddlebags, along with the money she'd saved and stolen. Lily carried her mother's gun and a small daguerreotype, the only other thing she'd taken from that sealed room. It showed a young woman, vibrant and smiling, before Tom Brennan had crushed her dreams. Lily touched it once through the leather, a promise to herself. She would not be her mother. She would not be broken. And beside her rode a man who saw her as more than property, more than a beautiful possession. Together, they would build something new in California soil, far from the ashes of Salvation Creek. Behind them, the town continued to burn, and Tom Brennan stood in the ruins of his saloon, screaming his daughter's name to an empty sky. But Lily couldn't hear him anymore. All she could hear was the rhythm of hooves on sand and Jake's steady breathing beside her, the sound of freedom. At last, the saloon keeper's darling had indeed led him to her secret room and locked the door. But what they'd locked inside was the past, and what they'd unlocked was a future neither had dared dream of until now. Dawn found them deep in the desert, the horses lathered with sweat and breathing hard. Jake had pushed them through the night, following old trails he'd learned from Apache scouts years before. The red rocks rose around them like ancient sentinels, offering cover but also potential ambush points. "We need to rest the horses," Jake said, guiding them toward a cluster of boulders that formed a natural shelter. A small spring seeped from the rocks, one of the secret water sources that made survival possible in this harsh land. Lily slid from her saddle, her legs trembling from the long ride. Despite her exhaustion, she moved efficiently, helping Jake tend to the horses. It was then he noticed she handled the animals with surprising expertise. "You've done this before," he observed. "Mother taught me." She loosened the paint's girth, her movements practiced. Before she married Father, she lived on a ranch in Texas. She used to tell me stories. Her voice trailed off. They made a cold camp, not daring to light a fire. Jake shared his jerky and hardtack while Lily produced dried fruit and nuts from her satchel. As the sun climbed higher, painting the rocks in shades of gold and crimson, they finally had a moment to breathe. "They'll be coming," Lily said quietly. It wasn't a question. "Yes, but not all of them. The Apache raid will have done damage, and your father will need men to protect what's left of his empire." Jake scanned the horizon. "My guess is Mackenzie, if he's still alive, and maybe 3 or 4 others. Rico survived. I saw him make it back inside before we ran." She shuddered. "He's worse than Mackenzie." "At least Mackenzie has rules." Jake had just opened his mouth to respond when he caught at a flash of light on metal, distant but unmistakable. "Down!" He pulled Lily behind the rocks as the first shot cracked across the desert, chips of stone exploding where she'd been sitting. "That's a Sharp's rifle," Jake said grimly. "Long range. They're still maybe half a mile out. Can we run?" "Horses are too tired. We'd be easy targets in the open." He checked his ammunition. "We make our stand here." More shots followed, methodical, probing their defenses. Jake counted muzzle flashes 4 rifles, spread in a semicircle. They were trying to pin them down, while others circled for a better position. "I count 4, Lily said, surprising him again. She'd positioned herself at another gap in the rocks, her mother's Colt steady in her hand. "You see Rico?" "Not yet, but he's out there." She fired, and Jake heard a yelp of pain. "Mother made sure I could shoot. Said a woman in the West who couldn't defend herself was just another victim waiting to happen." The firefight intensified. Their position was good, the rocks provided solid cover, and the spring meant they had water. But their ammunition wasn't infinite, and the sun was climbing, turning their shelter into an oven. "Morrison!" Rico's voice carried across the desert. "You know how this ends. Say give us the girl, and maybe we let you die quick." "Go to hell, Valdez!" Jake answered with a shot that sent Rico diving for cover. "Such language in front of the lady." Rico laughed. "Tell me, Miss Lily, did he promise you pretty things? A nice house, babies, he's going to give you nothing but a shallow grave." Lily's response was another shot. Closer this time. Rico cursed in Spanish. The siege continued as the sun reached its zenith. Jake had dropped one of the attackers, a man who'd gotten careless trying to flank them, but their ammunition was running low, and he could see Lily wilting in the heat despite her courage. Then came the sound that chilled his blood, hoofbeats, many hoofbeats. "Reinforcements," Lily said, her voice flat with despair. Jake peered through the rocks, then felt his heart lift. The riders coming weren't wearing town clothes. They were Apache, and at their head rode a familiar figure. 2 hawks, Jake breathed. The Apache war chief had brought a dozen warriors. They swept down on Rico's men like a desert storm. Rico's group, caught between the rocks and the Apache, scattered. Gunfire erupted from multiple directions. "Why?" Lily asked, watching in amazement. 3 summers ago, I found Two Hawk's son in a canyon, snake-bit and delirious, carried him to his people, stayed until the boy recovered. Jake fired at one of Rico's men trying to escape. Two Hawks said he owed me a debt. The battle was brief but vicious. Rico tried to rally his men, but facing Apache warriors in their element was different from bullying townspeople. One by one, Rico's men fell or fled. Finally, only Rico himself remained, trapped between the rocks and the Apache circle. "Morrison," Rico called out, his voice lacking its earlier bravado. "Let's settle this like men, you and me." Jake looked at Two Hawks, who nodded. The Apache pulled back, giving them space. "It's a trap," Lily warned. "Maybe, but this needs ending." Jake checked his Colt, then stepped into the open. Rico emerged from his cover, his scarred face twisted with hate. "You cost me everything. Morrison, my position, my respect." "You cost yourself those things," Jake interrupted, "the moment you became Brennan's dog." Rico went for his gun. He was fast, faster than Jake had expected. The 2 shots came so close together they sounded like one. Jake felt the wind of Rico's bullet pass his ear. Rico looked down at the spreading red stain on his chest, surprise replacing anger on his face. "The girl," he gasped, falling to his knees. "She was never worth dying for." "That's where you're wrong," Jake said quietly. Rico pitched forward into the sand and moved no more. Two Hawks approached, his warriors flanking him. The chief's weathered face showed no emotion as he surveyed the scene. "Your debt is paid," Jake said formally. "No." Two Hawks shook his head. "This was not about debt. This was about justice. The man Brennan brought suffering to my people. His daughter," he looked at Lily with surprising gentleness, "is not her father. She deserves freedom." "Thank you," Lily said simply. Two Hawks studied her. "You have your mother's spirit. I remember her, the woman who would bring medicine to the reservation when the agency doctor was too drunk to come. Brennan broke her body, but not her spirit. It lives in you." He signaled his warriors. "We will take the bodies. The desert will claim them. You were never here. Rico and his men died in the Apache raid on Salvation Creek." He paused. "But do not return. Brennan still lives, and his hatred will not die easily." "We're bound for California," Jake said. "Good. The eagle flies west to find new skies." Two Hawks mounted his horse. "There is an abandoned way station, 10 miles west. Fresh horses wait there, a gift from the Apache to the daughter of Mary Bennett." Lily's eyes widened. "You knew my mother's maiden name?" "She saved my nephew's life once. The Apache do not forget kindness or cruelty." He raised his rifle in salute. "Go now. Live well. Make many children who will know both courage and compassion." The Apache melted back into the desert as quickly as they'd come, taking the evidence of the battle with them. Jake and Lily were left alone with the wind and the vast sky. "Mary Bennett," Lily said softly. "She never told me she'd help the Apache. Sounds like there was a lot she never got the chance to tell you." Jake helped her mount the paint horse. "Maybe in California, you can be Mary Bennett's daughter instead of Tom Brennan's." They rode west, finding the way station exactly where Two Hawks had promised. 2 fresh horses waited, a magnificent black stallion and a swift gray mare. Supplies to food, water, ammunition, even a rifle. As they prepared to continue their journey, Lily suddenly laughed, the first truly free sound Jake had heard from her. "What? I just realized I don't even know your middle name. Here I am, running off to California with a man, and I don't know his full name." "Samuel," Jake said, smiling. "Jacob Samuel Morrison. My mother was partial to biblical names." Jacob Samuel Morrison, Lily repeated, as if tasting the words. And I'm Lily Marie Bennett, not Brennan. Never Brennan again. They mounted the fresh horses as the sun began its descent toward the western mountains. Somewhere behind them lay Salvation Creek, Tom Brennan, and all the chains that had bound them. Ahead stretched the promise of California, of gardens and quiet evenings and a life built on love rather than fear. "Ready, Miss Bennett?" Jake asked. "Ready, Mr. Morrison." She smiled, and it transformed her face. Showing the woman she could have been would be without the weight of her father's shadow. They rode into the setting sun, two souls who'd found each other in the midst of violence and pain, now seeking something gentler. The desert gradually gave way to scrub, then grassland. Each mile took them further from what was and closer to what could be. That night, camping under a ceiling of stars, Lily told Jake about her mother, the woman who'd taught her to shoot and ride and heal, who'd tried to preserve some spark of independence even as Tom Brennan sought to extinguish it. Jake shared his own stories, years of drifting, searching for something he couldn't name until he'd seen her that night in the Silver Dollar. "Do you think they'll follow?" Lily asked as they lay on opposite sides of the campfire, propriety maintained even in the wilderness. "Your father might send someone, but California's big, and we'll be careful. New names if we have to. New life, definitely." "Lily Morrison has a nice sound," she said softly. Jake's heart skipped. "That a proposal, Miss Bennett?" "Maybe, when we get to California, when we're sure we're safe. I want to do things proper church, flowers, a dress that isn't bought with blood money." "Then that's what we'll do." The fire crackled between them, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote sang to the moon. They were still in danger, still running, but for the first time in their lives, they were running towards something instead of away, and that made all the difference. The San Joaquin Valley spread before them like a promise kept, after 2 weeks of hard travel through desert and mountain passes. Jake and Lily finally gazed upon the green expanse of California farmland. The contrast to the harsh landscape they'd fled was almost overwhelming. Here was water, here was life, here was possibility. They'd stopped first in Stockton, where Jake traded their Apache-gifted horses for cash and a modest wagon. It pained him to sell the magnificent animals, but they were too distinctive, too likely to be remembered. In their place, he bought a reliable draft horse and supplies for farming. "Where to now?" Lily asked, studying the land registry maps at the courthouse. Jake pointed to an area south of Modesto. "There! Good soil, water rights from Dry Creek, and far enough from the main roads to discourage casual visitors." The property they found was 40 acres of neglected potential. An old farmhouse stood on a slight rise, its walls solid despite years of abandonment. The previous owner had died childless, the bank eager to sell. "It needs work." The bank manager, Mr. Hartwell, said apologetically, "Roof leaks, well needs cleaning, fences are down." "We'll take it," Lily said firmly. She'd introduced herself as Mrs. Morrison, and if Jake's heart swelled each time she used the name, he kept it to himself. They weren't truly married yet, but in this new place, who would know? Jake counted out bills, his savings, plus what Lily had taken from her father's safe. It was enough for the land, with some left over for repairs and seed. "Welcome to California, Mr. and Mrs. Morrison," Hartwell said, handing over the deed. "May you have better fortune than the previous owners." The first weeks were brutal. Jake worked from dawn to dusk, repairing the roof, rebuilding fences, clearing years of overgrowth. Lily worked beside him, her hands blistering and bleeding until calluses formed. She never complained, though Jake sometimes caught her staring at her roughened palms with a bemused expression. "Regrets?" he asked one evening as they sat on the repaired porch, exhausted and filthy. "Never," she said fiercely.
These hands are building something. Back there, they just existed.
They planted their first crop wheat with a kitchen garden near the house. Jake had learned farming as a boy in Missouri, before the war sent him wandering. The knowledge came back slowly, helped by advice from their nearest neighbor, Hans Muller, a German immigrant who farmed the adjacent property. Good land here, Muller told them, his English thick with accent. You work hard, the land rewards. You be lazy, the land knows. Muller's wife, Greta, took Lily under her wing, teaching her the mysteries of preserving food, making soap, and the thousand small economies that meant the difference between surviving and thriving on a farm. You were not always a farmer's wife, Greta observed one day, watching Lily's clumsy first attempts at churning butter. No, Lily admitted carefully.
I had a different life before.
Greta studied her shrewdly.
We all have before. This is America. Here, we become who we choose to be.
Summer came with its intense heat, different from the desert but challenging in its own way. Jake and Lily learned to work in the cooler hours, resting through the blazing afternoons. They swam in Dry Creek when the work was done, a simple pleasure that felt almost decadent after their austere beginnings. It was there, sitting on the creek bank one evening, that Jake finally asked properly.
Lily Marie Bennett, he said, dropping to one knee in the shallow water. Will you marry me? Really marry me, with papers and witnesses and all of it?
She laughed, tears streaming down her face.
Yes, Jacob Samuel Morrison. Yes, 1,000 times.
They married in the small Methodist church in town, with the Mullers as witnesses. Lily wore a simple blue dress she'd made herself nothing like the elaborate gowns she'd worn at the Silver Dollar. But Jake thought she'd never looked more beautiful. The Reverend. If he noticed the calluses on the bride's hands, or the sun-weathered look of recent hard living, said nothing. That night, in their own bed in their own house on their own land, they finally allowed themselves to believe they might actually be safe. Fall brought the harvest. The wheat came in golden and heavy, exceeding their modest expectations. Jake hired day laborers to help bring it in, paying fair wages that earned him respect in the community. Lily worked alongside them, her skill with the scythe earning surprised looks and eventual admiration. Your wife, she is not typical, Muller observed, watching Lily efficiently directing the storage of grain. No, Jake agreed proudly. She's not. They sold the wheat at good prices, the California population boom creating steady demand. For the first time in her life, Lily held money that she'd truly earned, not stolen or gifted or used as chain.
What should we do with it?
She asked, staring at the bank draft. Save some, use some for improvements, maybe buy the adjacent 20 acres before someone else does. Jake paused. What do you want to do with it? She was quiet for a long moment.
Books,
she said finally.
I want books, and maybe we could help start a school for the farm children.
That winter, as rain turned the fields green, Lily began teaching local children in their parlor. Word spread that the Morrison place offered lessons, and soon she had a dozen regular pupils. Parents paid what they could, sometimes coins, often eggs or preserved goods. Jake would come in from the fields to find Lily surrounded by children, her face animated as she explained numbers or letters. It was then he saw her fully transformed, no longer the saloon keeper's daughter, but a woman creating her own purpose. You're good at this, he told her one evening after the children had gone.
Mother wanted to be a teacher,
Lily said softly.
Before she met Father, before he convinced her that his dreams were bigger than hers.
Spring came again, and with it, an unexpected visitor. Jake was mending harness in the barn when he heard horses approaching, multiple horses, moving with purpose. His hand went instinctively to the gun he still wore. But the rider who appeared was alone, the others hanging back at the property line. Cole Mackenzie sat his black horse like a statue, older looking than Jake remembered, his pale eyes surveying the neat farmhouse and flourishing fields. "Morrison," he said by way of greeting. "Mackenzie," Jake kept his hand near his gun. "You're a long way from Salvation Creek." "I am. May I dismount? I come in peace." Jake nodded slowly. Mackenzie swung down, moving with the same liquid grace despite the passing months. "Why are you here?" Jake asked bluntly. "To deliver a message, and perhaps a warning." Mackenzie looked toward the house where Lily had appeared on the porch, rifle in hand. "Ma'am, you're looking well." "State your business," Lily said coldly. "Tom Brennan is dead." Mackenzie's words fell like stones into still water. "Shot by a whiskey drummer. He tried to cheat at cards. Died cursing your name, Mrs. Morrison." Lily lowered the rifle slightly. "When?" "2 months ago. The town's fallen apart since, without Brennan's iron hand. Old grudges surfaced. Last I heard, half of Main Street had burned in the fighting." "And you?" Jake asked. "What's your stake in this?" Mackenzie almost smiled. "I've retired. Turns out killing men for money loses its appeal after a while. I'm heading for Oregon Territory. Thought you should know about Brennan on my way north." "Why?" Lily stepped down from the porch, still wary but no longer actively hostile. "Because you deserved better than what that town tried to make you. Because Morrison here showed me something that night, that sometimes there are things worth fighting for besides money." He remounted his horse. "You've built something good here. Don't let the past poison it." "Any others who might come looking?" Jake asked. "No, most who might care are dead or scattered. You're free." He touched his hat brim. "Be happy, Mrs. Morrison. It's the best revenge against men like your father to live well despite them." He rode away, his men falling in behind him, heading north toward whatever redemption a retired gunfighter might find in Oregon. That night, Lily was quiet, processing the news of her father's death. Jake found her in the garden she'd planted, kneeling among the young tomato plants. "I thought I'd feel something," she said. "Relief, maybe, or sadness. But there's just nothing." "He was your father." "No." She stood, brushing dirt from her hands. "He was the man who sired me, the man who killed my mother slowly, day by day. You're more father to those children I teach than he ever was to me." Jake pulled her close, feeling her tremble slightly. "It's over, then, really over." "Yes." She looked up at him, and her smile was like sunrise. "Now we can truly begin." The farm prospered. They bought the additional 20 acres, planted fruit trees, expanded the vegetable garden. Lily's school became official, with the county providing a small salary and plans for a proper schoolhouse. Jake served on the water board, helping manage the irrigation systems that made the valley bloom. On quiet evenings, they sat on their porch and watched the sun set over their fields. The house that had been empty now rang with life friends visiting, children learning, harvests being planned. Lily had her books, Jake had his land, and both had what they'd truly been seeking, a place to belong. "Do you miss it?" Jake asked one evening. "The excitement, the danger." Lily laughed, her hand resting on her still flat belly where their first child grew. "Miss it, Jake. I spent 20 years in a prison made of whiskey and men's desires. This," she gestured to their simple, beautiful life. "This is the adventure I always dreamed of." The stars came out, brilliant in the clear California sky. Somewhere in the darkness, an owl called, the wheat whispered in the evening breeze, and life, real life, chosen life, earned life went on. The knock came at sunset on a Tuesday evening in late autumn. Jake was cleaning his rifle on the porch while Lily graded papers at the kitchen table, her pregnancy now showing beneath her simple calico dress. The sound wasn't urgent, but something about its deliberate rhythm made Jake's instincts sharpen. He opened the door to find a ghost from the past, Tom Brennan, though barely recognizable as the commanding figure who'd ruled Salvation Creek. The man before him was gaunt, his once powerful frame wasted by illness and hard living. His clothes hung loose, his hands trembled with palsy, and his eyes held the yellowish tinge of a failing liver. "Hello, daughter," Brennan wheezed. Jake's hand moved to his sidearm, but Brennan raised a shaking hand. "I'm not armed, Morrison. Couldn't hold a gun steady if I tried. I've come to talk, to settle accounts before I meet my maker." "Mackenzie said you were dead," Jake stated flatly. "Mackenzie saw what I wanted him to see. Let him spread the word. A dead man travels easier than a hunted one." Brennan swayed slightly, catching himself on the doorframe. "May I come in? I won't stay long. Can't stay long." Jake looked back at Lily, who had risen from the table, her face pale but composed. She nodded slightly. "5 minutes," Jake said, stepping aside. Brennan entered slowly, his gaze taking in the neat home, the books on shelves, the evidence of quiet prosperity. When he saw Lily's condition, something flickered in his eyes, regret, perhaps, or just recognition of all he'd thrown away. "You look like her," he said softly. "Your mother, especially now, with child. She had that same glow when she carried you." "Don't," Lily said sharply. "You don't get to invoke her memory, not after what you did." Brennan sank uninvited into a chair, seemingly unable to stand longer. "Fair enough. I didn't come for forgiveness. Some sins are beyond that. I came to give you what's yours by right." He reached into his coat with trembling fingers, producing a leather portfolio. "The deed to the silver dollar. Your mother's jewelry, what I didn't sell, and this," he pulled out a small leather journal. "Her diary from before I ruined everything." Lily made no move to take the items. "Why now?" "Because I'm dying." Brennan's laugh was bitter. "Doctor says 2 months, maybe 3. The drink finally won. Fitting end for Tom Brennan. Wouldn't you say?" "I wouldn't say anything," Lily replied coldly. "You're nothing to me." "I'm your father." "No." Lily's voice cut like a blade. "My father died the day he struck my mother for the first time. You're just the monster who wore his face after that." Brennan flinched as if slapped. For a moment, Jake saw past the dying tyrant to the man he might have been before greed and whiskey poisoned his soul. "I taught you to be strong," Brennan said weakly. "You taught me fear. Mother taught me strength, in the moments you weren't watching." Lily's hand moved protectively to her belly. "Everything good in me came from her. The money from the saloon. Blood money. I don't want it." "It wasn't all blood money." Brennan's voice rose with something of his old fire. "Some of it was hers, her inheritance from her family in Texas. I kept it separate, thought maybe someday." He trailed off, coughing. "It's in the Wells Fargo Bank in Sacramento. $20,000, enough to..." "To what? Buy my forgiveness, purchase absolution." Lily moved closer, and Jake saw Brennan shrink back from the fury in her eyes. "You sold me to Pete Garrison like livestock. You let Rico and men like him paw at me nightly. You killed Mother's spirit and would have killed mine if Jake hadn't..." She stopped, breathing hard. Jake moved to her side, his hand on her shoulder. "Take the money," Brennan pleaded. "Not for me, for the child. For Mary's grandchild. Let something good come from all the bad." "Everything good already has," Lily said. "I have a husband who loves me, a home, a purpose, students who call me Mrs. Morrison with respect, not the leers I got at the silver dollar. I have everything, and I built it without your blood money." "It's not mine." Brennan was desperate now. "It was your mother's, from her father's cattle ranch. I never touched it, even when the saloon was struggling. I kept thinking, hoping, that someday I could give it to you clean." "Nothing you touched stayed clean," Lily said, but Jake heard the slight waver in her voice. Brennan struggled to his feet. "I'll leave the papers. Do with them what you will. Burn them. Claim them. Give them to charity. I don't care anymore." He looked at her one last time. "You have her strength. The strength I tried to break and couldn't. Maybe that's punishment enough, knowing I failed to destroy the best part of her." He shuffled toward the door, each step an effort. At the threshold, he turned back. "The child, boy or girl?" "We don't know," Jake answered when Lily remained silent. "If it's a girl, consider the name Mary. If it's a boy—" Brennan's voice broke. "Name him anything but Thomas." He left then, an old man broken by his own choices. Shuffling into the gathering darkness, they watched from the porch as he climbed painfully onto a sway-backed horse and rode away, a shadow dissolving into shadows. Lily stood rigid until he was gone, then suddenly sagged against Jake. He caught her, feeling her tremble. "I thought I'd feel something," she whispered. "Anger, hatred, even pity. But there's just emptiness." "He hollowed himself out long ago," Jake said gently. "Can't feel much for an empty shell." They went back inside, where the leather portfolio lay on the table like an accusation. Lily stared at it for a long moment, then opened it with a sudden decision. The deed to the silver dollar was there, along with legal papers transferring ownership. A small velvet bag held her mother's wedding ring, a cameo brooch, and a gold locket. Inside the locket was a miniature portrait, a young Mary Bennett, vibrant and smiling, before Tom Brennan's shadow fell across her life. The diary was worn, its pages filled with careful feminine script. Lily opened it randomly and read aloud. June 15th, 1868. Tom brought me wildflowers today, gathered from the hills. He remembered they were my favorites. When he smiles that way, I can see the man I fell in love with. She closed it quickly, tears starting. "I can't, not yet." "You don't have to," Jake said. "It'll keep." The bank documents were straightforward. $20,000 in an account under Mary Bennett Brennan, transferred to Lily upon presentation of proper identification. "That's a fortune," Jake said quietly. "We could buy more land, build a proper schoolhouse, help the Mealers when their crops fail." "It's hers," Lily said, touching her mother's portrait. "Not his. He kept his word on that, at least." "So what do you want to do?" Lily was quiet for a long time, staring at the documents spread before her. Finally, she gathered them up, keeping her mother's jewelry and diary, but pushing the bank papers toward Jake. "We use it for good. A school, a real school, not just my kitchen classroom, with books and slates and maps, with scholarships for children whose families can't afford supplies." Her voice grew stronger. "We make it a monument to Mary Bennett, the teacher she wanted to be." "The Mary Bennett School," Jake said. "I like it. And we never tell anyone where the money came from. As far as the world knows, Tom Brennan died in Salvation Creek. And good riddance." She stood, moving to the window. "He was right about one thing. I do have her strength, and I'll use it to build something he could never understand, a legacy of learning instead of fear." Over the following months, they did exactly that. The money from Sacramento funded construction of a proper schoolhouse, complete with a bell tower and separate rooms for different age groups. They hired 2 additional teachers, brought in books from San Francisco, and established a fund for families who couldn't afford supplies. The Mary Bennett School opened in spring. With 42 students enrolled, Lily, now heavily pregnant, presided over the dedication ceremony. She spoke of education as liberation, of knowledge as power, of the importance of giving every child, boy or girl, rich or poor, the chance to become more than their circumstances. She never mentioned Tom Brennan. Word came 3 months later, through Hans Mueller, who'd heard it in town. A man answering Brennan's description had died in a charity hospital in Los Angeles. He'd been found in an alley, finally claimed by the whiskey that had been killing him slowly for years. The hospital buried him in a pauper's grave with no marker. Lily received the news while nursing their newborn daughter, Mary Catherine Morrison, named for grandmothers both remembered and reclaimed. She felt, she told Jake later, Only a distant sadness, not for the man who died, but for the man he might have been if different choices had been made. "Do you ever wonder," she asked one evening, as baby Mary slept in her cradle, "what turns a person like that? What makes them choose darkness over light?" "Fear, maybe," Jake answered, "or greed, or just an inability to see past their own wants." "I look at her," Lily said, gazing at their daughter, "and I can't imagine ever putting anything before her happiness, her future. How did he look at me and see only profit?" "Because he'd already sold his soul by then, piece by piece, compromise by compromise, until there was nothing left but hunger." Lily picked up her mother's diary, which she'd been reading in small doses, like medicine that heals but hurts. She loved him once, really loved him. These early entries, he was different, kind, ambitious, yes, but in ways that included her dreams too. People change. Or maybe they just reveal what was always there. She closed the diary. "It doesn't matter now. He's gone, and we're here, and Mary will grow up knowing only love." The school flourished. Students who'd never held a book before learned to read. Farm children discovered mathematics and geography. Girls learned alongside boys, preparing for futures their mothers could never have imagined. And in the evenings, when the work was done and baby Mary gurgled in her cradle, Jake and Lily would sit on their porch and watch the sunset paint their fields gold. The ghosts of Salvation Creek had finally been laid to rest, and in their place grew something Tom Brennan would never have understood: a life built on love, sustained by hope, and dedicated to lifting others up rather than keeping them down. The saloon keeper's darling had become a teacher, a mother, a builder of dreams. And in the end, that was the greatest revenge of all, not to destroy Tom Brennan, but to become everything he'd tried to prevent her from being, to take his daughter and transform her into Mary Bennett's daughter instead, carrying forward the best of the past while leaving the worst buried in unmarked graves. 5 years had passed since Tom Brennan's visit, and the Morrison farm had become a cornerstone of the valley community. The wheat fields stretched golden in the summer sun, the orchards heavy with fruit, and the Mary Bennett School had grown to serve 3 neighboring townships. Life had settled into rhythms as reliable as the season's planting and harvest, teaching and learning, sunset conversations on the porch that had become their sanctuary. Jake stood in the doorway of the barn, watching 5-year-old Mary Catherine help her mother gather eggs. The child had Lily's wheat-colored hair, but Jake's steady disposition, a combination that made her both beautiful and grounded. She carried her small basket with serious concentration, mimicking her mother's careful movements. "Gentle now, Mary Cat," Lily said, using the pet name that had stuck. "The hens don't like sudden movements." "I know, Mama, Mrs. Henderson says I have the softest hands with the chickens." Jake smiled, remembering his own wandering years, the loneliness of campfires under empty skies. He'd traveled thousands of miles to find home, only to discover it wasn't a place but a person, and now, people. "Papa?" Mary Catherine spotted him and ran over. "Eggs forgotten. Did you see I gathered 6 eggs all by myself?" 6 whole eggs. Jake swept her up, making her giggle. "Why, that's enough for a proper breakfast. You're becoming quite the farmer, little one." "I want to be a teacher like Mama," Mary Catherine announced. "But I can gather eggs too, Mrs. Muller says a person should know many things." "Mrs. Muller is wise," Lily said, joining them. She looked tired. The new term had brought 40 additional students, and even with 3 other teachers, the work was demanding. But it was a good tired, the kind that came from building something meaningful. That evening, after Mary Catherine was asleep, Jake found Lily on the porch, her mother's diary in her lap. She'd read it through completely now, several times, finding new meanings with each pass. "Listen to this," she said. "August 3rd, 1867. I felt the baby move today, strong and sure. Tom says he hopes for a son to carry on his name, but I dream of a daughter. Someone to teach all the things my mother taught me, and all the things I've learned since. Someone to be stronger than I am, braver than I've been. Jake settled beside her on the bench they'd built together their second spring. She got her wish. Did she? Sometimes I wonder if I'm strong or just stubborn, if I'm brave or just too afraid to stop. What are you afraid of? Lily closed the diary, looking out over their fields. That it's too good, that something will come along and shatter it, like— She stopped, but Jake knew. Like her childhood had been shattered, like her mother's dreams had been destroyed. We're not them, Jake said firmly. We make different choices. Do we sometimes when you're working late in the fields? I catch myself watching the road, waiting for, I don't know, him, maybe, or men like Rico, or just the past, coming to collect what it thinks it's owed. Jake took her hand, feeling the calluses that matched his own. The past already collected, in blood and tears and wasted years. We don't owe it anything more. A sound from inside made them both turn Mary Catherine, calling out in her sleep. Lily rose to check on her, and Jake followed. Standing in the doorway of their daughter's room, Mary Catherine had kicked off her covers, one small arm flung above her head in abandon. Lily smoothed the blanket back over her, humming softly. It was moments like these that Jake understood what they'd truly built. Not just a farm or a school, but a safe harbor, a place where a child could sleep without fear, where nightmares were soothed with songs instead of silence. The next morning brought a letter that would test their hard-won peace. Jake collected the mail in town, noticing the Arizona postmark with mild curiosity. The letter was addressed to Lily in an unfamiliar, educated hand. She opened it at the kitchen table, Mary Catherine playing with her doll nearby. As she read, the color drained from her face. "What is it?" Jake asked. Wordlessly, she handed him the letter. "Dear Mrs. Morrison, my name is Elizabeth Garrison. You may remember my late husband, Peter. I am writing to inform you that certain documents have come into my possession regarding business dealings between your father and mine. Documents that suggest irregular transfer of properties and possible criminal activities. I have no interest in pursuing these matters. Peter is dead, and I prefer to leave the past buried with him. However, I felt you should know these papers exist. I am destroying them upon posting this letter. I hope you have found the peace that eluded so many in Salvation Creek. Respectfully, Elizabeth Garrison." Jake set down the letter. "She's letting you know it's over. Really over. Or warning me it could start again." Lily's voice was tight. "Those documents, if copies exist, then we'd face it, together, like we always have." Jake covered her hand with his. "But I think she's sincere. Sometimes women understand what men never could, that some victories aren't worth winning." That afternoon, Lily burned the letter in the kitchen stove, watching the flames consume the last official connection to Salvation Creek. Mary Catherine helped, tossing in small twigs, making a game of it without understanding the significance. "Why are we burning papers, Mama?" "To stay warm," Lily said simply, "and to make room for new things." The summer passed in its familiar rhythm. Jake worked the fields with hired hands, young men who called him Mr. Morrison, with respect earned through fair wages and honest dealing. Lily prepared for the new school term, ordering books from San Francisco, corresponding with educators back east about new teaching methods. One evening, Jake came in from the fields to find Lily and Mary Catherine in the garden, picking tomatoes for dinner. The sun slanted golden through the leaves, and, for a moment, he saw at Lily as she might have been if life had been kinder from the start. The defensive walls she'd built in Salvation Creek had slowly crumbled over the years, replaced by something stronger, genuine confidence, rooted in accomplishment rather than survival. "Papa, look!" Mary Catherine ran to him with a basket of tomatoes. "I picked the reddest ones." "Fine job, farmer girl." He ruffled her hair. then looked at Lily. "Good day." The Hendersons' twin boys started today, 6 years old and never held a pencil before. By afternoon, they were writing their names. Her smile held the satisfaction of small miracles. Days like this, I understand why Mother wanted to teach. After dinner, as was their custom, they sat on the porch while Mary Catherine played in the yard, chasing fireflies in the gathering dusk. These were the hours Jake treasured most, the work done, the day cooling, his family safe within sight. "I've been thinking," Lily said, "about expanding the school again, adding a dormitory for children from the outlying ranches. Board them during the week, send them home weekends." "That's ambitious." "The money's there, thanks to—" She paused, still uncomfortable acknowledging the source of their school funds. "Thanks to Mother's legacy, and the need is real. The Joaquin family rides 3 hours each way to bring their children." Jake considered. It would mean more staff, more responsibility. "Yes, but also more opportunity. More children lifted up." She turned to him. "What do you think?" "I think Mary Bennett would be proud." They talked through the plans as stars emerged overhead. Mary Catherine eventually tired of chasing fireflies and climbed into Jake's lap, yawning hugely. "Tell me a story, Papa." "What kind of story? About when you were little?" Jake thought back to his Missouri childhood, selecting memories carefully edited for young ears. He told her about fishing in the creek, about his old dog Blue, about helping his father break horses. He didn't mention the war that shattered that life, the wandering years that followed, the violence that had marked his path to their door. "Did you always want to be a farmer?" Mary Catherine asked sleepily. "No, little one. For a long time, I didn't know what I wanted to be." "How did you figure it out?" Jake looked at Lily over their daughter's head. "I met your mother, and suddenly, everything made sense. Later, after Mary Catherine was asleep in her bed and they were alone in theirs." Lily traced the scar on Jake's shoulder, a souvenir from the gunfight at the rocks. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked. "The adventure, the danger." Jake considered. "I miss the simplicity sometimes, when surviving was enough, when I only had to worry about myself. And now I have more to lose, but also more reason to be careful, to be smart, to build things that last." He pulled her closer. "Do you miss anything?" "No," she said without hesitation. "Everything before was just waiting. This is living." In the morning, Jake would rise early to check the irrigation channels. Lily would prepare for another day of teaching, of opening minds and planting seeds more valuable than any crop. Mary Catherine would help with chores before joining the other children at school, proud to be both the teacher's daughter and a student in her own right. But for now, they lay together in the quiet house, listening to the night sounds of their land, the creek murmuring in its banks, an owl calling from the oak tree, the rustle of wind through wheat. Each sound a note in the symphony of their chosen life, their earned peace, their carefully tended happiness. The scars remained Jake's physical ones, Lily's emotional ones, the shared memories of desperate flights and violent confrontations. But scar tissue, as any farmer knew, was often stronger than what it replaced. And what they'd built on the ashes of their past was sturdy enough to weather whatever storms might come. "I love you," Lily whispered in the darkness. "And I love you," Jake replied. "Every day more than the last." It wasn't poetry, neither of them were poets, but it was truth, solid as the land they worked, enduring as the mountains that ringed their valley, and infinitely more precious than all the gold that had never been found in Salvation Creek's played-out mines. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges and rewards, but tonight they were simply Jake and Lily Morrison, farmers and teachers, parents and partners, two souls who'd found each other across miles of desert and depths of despair, and who'd chosen to build something beautiful from the ruins of what they'd escaped. The October sunset painted the California sky in shades of amber and rose, The same colors that had marked Jake's arrival in Salvation Creek all those years ago. But now, instead of dust and danger, the evening brought the comfortable sounds of home Mary Catherine practicing her letters at the kitchen table, the distant lowing of cattle, the creak of the porch swing where Lily sat with her hands resting on her rounded belly. "How are you feeling?" Jake asked, joining her on the swing. "Like I'm carrying a wild Mustang." Lily laughed, wincing as the baby kicked. "This one's got your restless spirit, I think. Or your iron will. Heaven help us either way." She took his hand, placing it where the baby moved. "There, feel that." Jake felt the strong movement beneath his palm, still amazed by the miracle of it even the second time around. "Strong, that's good." "Everything about this life is strong," Lily said softly. "Sometimes I can hardly believe it's real." They sat in companionable silence, watching Mary Catherine through the window. At 7, she was the image of her mother, but with Jake's steady temperament, a combination that made her both beautiful and wise beyond her years. "Papa?" Mary Catherine called, appearing in the doorway. "Will you help me with my arithmetic? Mama says I need to practice my multiplication tables." "In a moment, sweetheart. Come sit with us first." She climbed onto the swing between them, fitting perfectly into the space they made for her. "When will the baby come?" "Soon," Lily said. "Perhaps 2 more weeks." "I hope it's a brother," Mary Catherine announced, "so I can teach him things like you teach me." "And what would you teach him?" Jake asked. "Everything how to read, how to be gentle with the chickens, how to find the best fishing spots in the creek." She paused thoughtfully. "And I'd tell him our stories, about how you and Mama came here to build our farm." Jake and Lily exchanged glances over their daughter's head. They'd been careful about those stories, sharing the adventure but not the darkness, the journey but not the demons they'd fled. "What's your favorite part of our story?" Lily asked carefully. "When Papa stood up to the bad men to protect you," Mary Catherine said without hesitation. "And when you rode away together under the stars. It's like the fairy tales in my books, only real." "Life's not always a fairy tale, little one," Jake said gently. "I know." Mary Catherine's voice held surprising wisdom. "Mrs. Muller told me that. She said real happiness isn't magic, it's work, like tending a garden. You have to pull the weeds and water the good plants every single day." "Mrs. Muller is a smart woman," Lily murmured. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Jake was repairing a fence post when he saw the rider approaching a woman, riding side saddle with practiced ease despite the rough road. As she drew closer, he recognized her with a start. Elizabeth Garrison. Though much changed from the woman he'd glimpsed years ago in Pete Garrison's shadow, she was perhaps 40 now, her hair showing silver threads, her face marked by lines that spoke of both sorrow and strength. She wore simple traveling clothes, a far cry from the elaborate gowns her late husband had demanded. Mr. Morrison," she said, dismounting gracefully. "I apologize for arriving unannounced. I was passing through California and, well, I felt compelled to stop." Jake helped her secure her horse, wary but courteous. "Mrs. Garrison, Lily's at the school. I can send for her." "No, please. Perhaps it's better we speak first." She looked around the thriving farm with obvious admiration. "You've built something beautiful here, something lasting." "We've been fortunate." "Fortune had little to do with it, I think." She met his eyes directly. "Mr. Morrison, I came to tell you something, and to ask something." Jake waited, hand instinctively near where his gun used to rest. Old habits died hard. "I'm remarrying," she said simply. "A good man, a doctor in San Francisco. We plan to use Pete's money, what's left of it, to build a hospital, a place where women can find help, especially those escaping difficult situations." "That's admirable. It's necessary. You see, I know what my husband was, what he did, not just to your wife, But to others, to me, she touched her throat unconsciously, and Jake noticed faint scars he'd missed before. I stayed silent then, out of fear. I won't be silent anymore. Why tell me this? Because I wanted you to know that Lily wasn't alone, that she was brave where I was cowardly, and that her escape gave me hope, even in my darkest moments. Elizabeth's voice grew stronger. I wanted to thank her, and to ask would she consider speaking to the women will help many will come from situations like hers. They'll need to know that survival is possible, that there's life after hell. Jake finished quietly. Yes. Footsteps on the path made them turn. Lily approached, Mary Catherine skipping beside her, both returning from the morning session at school. Lily slowed when she saw their visitor, recognition dawning. Elizabeth, she said uncertainly. Hello, Lily. I hope I'm not intruding. For a moment, the two women simply looked at each other, survivors of the same storm, though they'd weathered it differently. Then Lily stepped forward, extending her hand. You're welcome here, she said simply. They talked for hours. First awkwardly, then with growing understanding. Elizabeth spoke of her years with Garrison, the gradual escalation of control and cruelty. Lily shared her own story more fully than she ever had with anyone except Jake. Mary Catherine, sensing the gravity of the conversation, played quietly nearby, her presence a reminder of all that had grown from escaped pain. I'll help, Lily said finally. I'll speak to your women. If my story can light even one candle in someone else's darkness, then perhaps all of it meant something. Elizabeth's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. I wish I'd had your courage back then. Maybe things would have been different. We all find our courage when we can, Lily said gently. You found yours. That's what matters. As Elizabeth prepared to leave, she pulled out a small package. I brought this. It was in Pete's papers. I think it belongs to you. Inside was a daguerreotype, Lily's mother, young and vibrant, standing beside a man who must have been her father. On the back, in faded ink, Mary and James Bennett on their wedding day. May all their dreams come true. Lily traced her mother's face with trembling fingers. Where did he get this? Your father owed Pete money before you were involved. This was collateral. Apparently, Pete kept things like that, pieces of people's lives. Trophies. Elizabeth's voice was bitter. I'm returning what I can find to their rightful owners. After Elizabeth left, promising to write when the hospital was established, the Morrison family sat down to their evening meal. The daguerreotype stood propped against the salt cellar, Mary Bennett watching over her daughter's table. Mama, Mary Catherine said suddenly, were you sad for a long time before Papa? Lily considered her daughter carefully. Yes, sweetheart, I was, but not anymore. No, not anymore. Because of us, me and Papa and the new baby. Lily reached over to smooth her daughter's hair. Because of you. Yes, but also because I chose to build something better than sadness. It's the bravest thing a person can do, choose hope when they've known despair. That night, as Jake banked the fire and checked the locks, another old habit, he found Lily on the porch despite the cooling air, her shawl wrapped tight around her. The baby, he asked, concerned. Just restless. We both are. She made room for him beside her. Elizabeth's visit stirred up old ghosts. Regrets. No, gratitude, maybe, for how far we've come, for what we've built. She leaned against him. Do you remember that night in the stable when I kissed you and said I'd given you a reason to stay? Every detail. I was so desperate then, so afraid. I thought I was trapping you, binding you to my tragedy. She laughed softly. I never imagined we'd have this peace, purpose, babies. 2 babies, Jake corrected. And maybe more, if you're willing. Jake Morrison, you're insatiable.
she teased, then grew serious. I want to name this one Samuel if it's a boy, after your middle name, and if it's a girl,
Elizabeth, Jake suggested.
for courage found. Elizabeth Hope, Lily agreed, for courage found and futures claimed.
2 weeks later, Elizabeth Hope Morrison entered the world with a lusty cry that proclaimed her a fighter from the first breath. Mary Catherine was enchanted with her sister, spending hours just watching her sleep, marveling at tiny fingers and toes.
She's so small, Mary Catherine whispered. Were I ever that small?
Even smaller, Jake told her. But you grew strong, just like she will. As Lily recovered, cared for by Greta Mueller and the other farm wives who'd become her chosen family, Jake often found himself standing in the doorway of their bedroom, watching his wife nurse their daughter while Mary Catherine read to them from her primer. These moments felt almost too precious to be real, as if he might wake and find himself back on that dusty road to Salvation Creek, alone and searching for something he couldn't name. But it was real. The baby's cries at night were real. Mary Catherine's laughter was real. Lily's hand reaching for his in the darkness was real. They'd built this life choice by choice, day by day, from the ashes of what they'd escaped. One evening, as autumn deepened toward winter, Jake found Lily in the barn, of all places. She stood by the stall where they kept the buggy, running her hand along its side.
Planning an escape,
he teased. She smiled.
No, remembering one. Sometimes I come here when the house is quiet, just to remind myself that we chose this, that we fought for it, that every ordinary day is a victory.
Nothing about you is ordinary. Lily Morrison.
Oh, but I am. Wonderfully, blessedly ordinary. A farmer's wife, a school teacher, a mother. Everything I dreamed of being when dreams were all I had.
Jake pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her hair lavender soap now, not the heavy perfume of the silver dollar. Then here's to ordinary miracles.
To ordinary miracles,
she agreed. And to the man who helped me find them. They walked back to the house together, where lamplight spilled golden from the windows, and their daughters waited, one practicing her letters, one sleeping in her cradle. The night was clear, stars brilliant in the California sky, and somewhere in the distance, a mockingbird sang its complicated song of borrowed melodies made new. The saloon keeper's darling had indeed led him to her secret room and locked the door. But the secret was not what either of them had expected that long-ago night in Salvation Creek. The secret was this: that two broken people could choose wholeness, that fear could transform into love, that a desperate flight could become a purposeful journey home. And as they stepped through their own front door, into the warmth and light of the life they'd built together, both Jake and Lily knew the truth. They were no longer running from anything. They were simply living, day by precious day, in the shelter of each other's courage and the grace of second chances seized and made good. The door closed behind them, shutting out the darkness, holding in the light, and in the California night, all was well. Thank you so much for listening to this Wild West love story. I hope you enjoyed following Jake and Lily's journey from the dangerous saloons of Salvation Creek to their peaceful farm in California. Where are you listening to this story from? Please share in the comments below. I'd love to connect with listeners from around the world. Don't forget to subscribe to From Wild West channel for more tales of courage, romance, and adventure from the American frontier. What did you think of Jake and Lily's story? Share your thoughts in the comments.